The voice on the spirit box didn't come from the static. It came from right behind me, and it whispered my name, the name I'd never given them. You seek the shadows, the whispers in the dark, the truth that hides just beyond the edge of your vision. You have found your lineage. Nightbound Bloodline presents 5 latest ghost hunting stories. What you are about to hear are not campfire tales. They are field reports from the frontier of the unknown, sent to us by paranormal investigation teams and lone operators. These accounts are recent, documented, and carry the chilling weight of authenticity. The individuals involved are professionals and skeptics, people who enter the dark with meters and cameras, seeking evidence. Sometimes the evidence seeks them back. Prepare yourself for first-hand testimonies from the hunt. Our first story comes from a team investigating one of the most notoriously active locations in the American South, the Perdition Cotton Mill. Story 1. The Perdition Protocol. My name is Marcus. I'm 36 years old, and I've been a lead investigator with Spectral Insights Paranormal for 8 years. Before that, I was an electrician. I like things I can measure, trace, and explain. My whole approach is built on data, EMF spikes, temperature drops, digital voice phenomena. I don't believe in ghost stories. I believe in evidence. Or I used to. The Perdition Mill closed in 1952 after a massive fire. 23 people died. It's been a hotspot for over a decade. We'd reviewed every piece of footage from other teams. Shadow figures on the second-floor catwalk, EVPs of children crying near the old machinery. We thought we knew what to expect. We had a new piece of tech, a customized spirit box that sweeps frequencies at a rate designed for clearer speech. We called it the clairvoyance engine. It was our pride and joy. We set up at 11 p.m. The air was thick and cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, not just your skin. It was dead quiet. No rodents, no insects. Just the sound of our own footsteps crunching on grit and broken glass. That silence, it's your first clue. Nature vacates these places for a reason. For the first 2 hours, we got nothing. A few random blips on the EMF, easily explained by old wiring. Some of the team were getting frustrated. Then, at 1:17 a.m., we decided to do a solo session in the old foreman's office, a small, brick room on the ground floor. I volunteered. I sat on the floor, turned on the clairvoyance engine, and started asking questions. The sound was the usual chaotic burst of white noise and radio fragments, snippets of music, talk shows, static. I asked, "Is there anyone here with us?" Always. My blood went cold. The sweep rate was too fast for a word to form that clearly. It was a statistical anomaly. I leaned forward, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I asked, "What is your name?" "The manager." The EMF spiked hard. The air got colder, so cold I could see my breath plume in my headlamp beam. I felt this pressure in my ears, like I was descending in an airplane. And then I asked the third question. "How did you die here?" "Marcus." I didn't. It said my name. It used my name. I never gave my name during the session. The team outside didn't know I was in that specific room yet. That voice, it wasn't in the box. It was in the room with me, using the box like a microphone. It was answering a question I hadn't asked, telling me it wasn't a victim. It was something else. I ran. I've never run from an investigation before. But in that moment, I wasn't a collector of data. I was prey. I felt a hatred in that room, an intelligence that knew me and was playing with me. I burst out of the office into the main floor, white-faced, and my team saw it immediately. They said I looked like I'd aged 10 years. We reviewed the audio. The voice saying my name was recorded on the spirit box's internal drive, but it was also on my headcam mic, louder and clearer. The waveform was identical. The sound originated from a point in space behind me, not from the speaker. We analyzed it 6 ways from Sunday. There is no technical explanation. I haven't touched the clairvoyance engine since. I sold my share of the team. I'm back to being an electrician. I deal with wires and circuits, things that follow rules. Because I know now that some things on the other side, they aren't lost souls. They're aware. They're listening. And sometimes they use our own tools to talk back. A chilling account from the front lines of modern paranormal research. But what happens when the hunt takes a more physical turn? Story 2. The Fingerprints at Fernbridge. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I'm a professor of architectural history, and I run a small YouTube channel documenting historical preservation. I do not believe in ghosts. I believe in the stories bricks and mortar can tell, in the erosion of time, in documented history. My visit to Fernbridge Asylum was meant to be my crowning work, a thorough photogrammetry scan of the entire structure before its demolition. Fernbridge operated from 1898 to 1972. Its records are a litany of outdated, often cruel, psychiatric practices. I was granted a one-week exclusive access. My equipment was state-of-the-art: LiDAR scanners, high-resolution 360-degree cameras, sensitive microphones for ambient audio capture. I was there to create a perfect digital tomb, not to commune with spirits. The first 2 days were methodical, exhausting, and completely normal. On the morning of the third day, I was working in the former hydrotherapy ward, a room of cracked ceramic tubs and rusted pipes. I just finished a scan and was checking the data on my tablet. That's when I saw it. The scan showed what looked like recent handprints in the thick dust on the wall. Human-sized. I'd been alone in the building for 48 hours. I was certain they hadn't been there when I set up. A chill, completely separate from the building's natural cold, went through me. I told myself it was runoff, moisture from the old pipes. But the LiDAR doesn't lie about texture. Those were pressure impressions. They were bigger than my hands. And they were fresh. I documented them with my regular camera, my heart starting a low, steady drumbeat in my chest. I decided to do an impromptu audio session. I set a recorder down in the center of the room, asked a few simple questions about the room's history, and left it running for an hour while I worked elsewhere. When I reviewed it that night in my on-site trailer, I almost deleted it without listening. I felt foolish, but I played it back. For 50 minutes, there was nothing but the faint hum of my equipment in the distance. Then, clear as day, a voice. The water was so cold. Please let me out. It was a direct answer to a question I'd asked about the treatments. The voice sounded exhausted, terrified, and it was right next to the microphone. I felt nauseous. This wasn't a crackly EVP. This was a pristine, intelligible sentence. My historical mind raced. Could it be a residual imprint, some acoustic trick of the tile and pipe? I had to know. I returned after midnight. I needed to rule out the possibility of an intruder, an animal, anything physical. I dusted the entire floor in front of the wall with talcum powder, creating a perfect blank canvas. I set up a motion-activated camera on a delay, pointing at the powder and the wall. Then I left, sealing the door behind me with a piece of tape only I would break. The camera was set to start recording 5 seconds after it detected motion to save battery. I didn't see what triggered it, but when I played the footage at dawn, there were footprints in the powder and new handprints on the wall. The camera saw nothing. No shadow, no form, just the evidence of weight, of pressure, of a presence standing and leaning in that exact spot at 3:07 in the morning. The door was still sealed. The windows were barred and rusted shut. I packed my equipment and left that morning. I forfeited the rest of my access. The demolition went ahead as scheduled. My digital model of Fernbridge is flawless, a perfect historical record. And embedded in that record, in the data of Room B14, are 2 sets of handprints. One set from a scan, one set from a photograph. Both made by something that has no physical body, yet exerted physical force. I still don't believe in ghosts, in the classical sense. But I now have undeniable, peer-reviewable data that demonstrates an anomalous, intelligent interaction with a physical environment. Something remembered the cold of the water. Something stood in that powder. My world is no longer just brick and mortar. It's brick and mortar and a silence that can leave fingerprints. From the digital ghost in the machine to a physical mark left in dust. But some encounters are not so passive. Some follow you home. Story 3. The Thing in the Attic Duct. My name is Leo. I'm 28, and I install home security systems for a living. I'm the guy who comes to your house to keep you safe. I've crawled through 100 attics, 1,000 crawl spaces. I know the sounds houses make, the settling, the pipes, the squirrels in the eaves. I'm not scared of the dark. I'm paid to navigate it. It started about 6 months after my wife, Sarah, and I moved into our new place. A classic starter home, built in the 80s. Nothing special, nothing with a bad history we knew of. We were happy. Then, the noises began. Not the usual pops and creaks. This was different. It came from the ceiling, specifically from the HVAC duct that runs from the attic down to the vents in the hallway and our future nursery. It sounded like a heavy toolbox was being dragged through the ductwork. At first, we blamed an animal, a raccoon, maybe. I went into the attic half a dozen times. I found nothing. No droppings, no nests, no entry points. The ducts were intact. The sounds got more frequent. Always after midnight. Always that same slow, deliberate scrape, moving from one end of the house to the other, following the duct's path. We stopped sleeping. Sarah was terrified. I was frustrated. My professional pride was insulted. I couldn't find the source. I decided to use my work equipment. I had a snake camera used for looking inside walls. I fed it up into the main supply duct through a vent. I expected to see dust, maybe a dead bird. I panned the camera around. Nothing. Then I angled it upward, toward where the duct goes into the attic plenum. That's when I saw it. There was something up there, wedged in the junction. It wasn't an animal's fur. It looked lumpy, and those eyes, or what I thought were eyes, they didn't blink. They just watched the little lens of my camera. And then the sound started again, but this time, I was listening through the camera's sensitive mic. It was breathing. Something living was inside my ductwork. Something big enough to fill the space. I yanked the camera out so fast I almost broke it. My hands were slick with sweat. I called an exterminator, a wildlife guy. He went into the attic, checked the roof, the vents. He found nothing. He said, and I'll never forget his confused tone, "There's no way anything bigger than a mouse is getting in there, Leo. The math doesn't work." That's when I shifted from professional to desperate. I bought an ambient audio recorder, the kind paranormal investigators use. I sealed it in a Ziploc bag and, using magnets, stuck it to the inside of the nursery vent. I let it run for 72 hours. I fast-forwarded through hours of silence and house noise. Then I found it. LEOCNICOMEDOWN. It knew my name. It was in the walls, asking permission. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I showed Sarah the audio file. We didn't speak. We just started packing a bag. We stayed at her parents' for a week. When we came back, I was a different man. I went into the attic with a cordless drill and a sheet of steel. I sealed that duct junction shut with 24 screws. I poured expanding foam into every conceivable gap. I didn't care about code. I cared about sealing a door. The scraping stopped. The house is silent. We're trying to sell it now, at a loss. We have to disclose the noise complaints, of course. We don't mention the recording. Who would believe us? I still install security systems. But now, when I'm in an attic and I hear a house creak, I freeze. I'm not listening for burglars or pests anymore. I'm listening for something that knows names, something that lives in the arteries of a home, waiting for an invitation to come down. A violation of the one place meant to be a sanctuary. But what of places that are sanctuaries to something else entirely? Our next story takes us into the deep woods, where an old faith meets a much older presence. Story 4. The Crooked Grove. My name is Eleanor Vance. I've been a practicing solitary pagan, a daughter of the old hills, for over 30 years. I don't hunt ghosts. I honor spirits of the land, the stone, the stream. I leave offerings for the fae at the mossy stones and ask permission from the greenwood before I take a single herb. My craft is about balance, respect. I know the difference between a presence and a predator. There's a place about 3 miles behind my property, deep in a hollow the sun barely touches. We've always called it the Crooked Grove. The trees there grow in spirals, their trunks bent as if pushed by a giant hand. The local kids have scary stories about it, but the old families, we just knew to leave it be. It was a place for leaving, not for taking. Last Samhain, I felt a pull, a dissonance. The usual spirits of my land felt agitated, withdrawn. I kept dreaming of the grove, of the moss drinking something dark from the roots. I knew I had to go, not to investigate, but to listen, to see if an offering was needed to restore the balance. It was the 1st of November, the veil at its thinnest. The silence was the first wrong thing. A mature forest is never silent. This was a vacuum. The second was the smell, not decay, but a sweet, cloying scent, like rotting honey and damp earth. It clung to the back of my throat. I began my usual practice. I stated my intention aloud, that I came in peace, only to listen. I reached out with my senses, the way I've done 1,000 times. Instead of the gentle hum of the woodland spirit, I was met with a hunger, a vast, patient, ancient emptiness. It wasn't malicious, not in the way we think. It was like the hunger of the earth itself, oblivious and consuming. And it was focused on me. That's when the trees began to move. Not like in a movie. It was slow, glacial. A branch that had been to my left was now slightly ahead of me. The spiral pattern of the trunk nearest me seemed to have tightened. I opened my eyes. The offering I had just placed was gone. The moss where it had lain was smooth, as if it had been absorbed. I stood up, my heart a trapped bird in my chest. The path I had entered from was still there, but the configuration of the trees around it looked different, tighter. I took a step toward it, and the sweet rot smell intensified. From the corner of my eye, I saw the moss flow. Like a liquid, it rippled away from my foot and toward the base of the largest twisted oak. A voice came then, but it didn't come from the air. It vibrated up through the soles of my boots, through my bones. It was the sound of roots grinding against stone, of sap moving in deep veins, given a semblance of words. STAYBECOME-SOIL. It wasn't an invitation. It was a statement of process. I was a nutrient that had entered the system. The grove wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was the entity. The trees were its limbs, the moss its skin, the hunger in the earth its mind. My craft teaches that all things have spirit. I never considered that a place itself could have a single, unified spirit and that it could be ravenous. I didn't run. Running triggers the predator in any being. I spoke, my voice shaking. I said, I am not yours. I belong to the sun and the open sky. I released my energy back to the light. I poured every ounce of my will into that declaration, visualizing a cord of sunlight connecting me to the world outside the hollow. A shaft of light, real sunlight, pierced the canopy. Just one. It felt like a lifeline. I kept backing, step by agonizing step, repeating my release, never turning my back on the central oak. The sweet smell began to fade, replaced by the normal scent of damp forest. The sense of focused hunger receded, becoming once more a diffuse, ambient emptiness. I made it out. I left an entire basket of offerings at the edge of my property that night. Milk, honey, the finest tobacco, an apology for the intrusion, and a plea for clear boundaries. I have not returned to the hollow. I can feel the grove sometimes in my dreams, a slow, vegetative thoughts moving through the bedrock. I still practice my craft, but my maps now have a blank, forbidden space. Some hungers are too old and too deep to reason with. You just have to know where their table is and never, ever sit down. A reminder that the oldest entities may not dwell in houses, but in the very land beneath our feet. For our final story, we return to the tools of the modern age, where the search for proof becomes a terrifying game of cat and mouse with an unseen player. Story 5. The Protocol. My handle is Echo. I'm a data analyst and an experimental paranormal researcher. I don't use EMF meters or spirit boxes. I use code. My theory is that if consciousness can interact with our environment, it might also interact with digital spaces, random number generators, network packets, raw data streams. I built a program I called the Protocol. I set up a laptop running the protocol in the central server aisle with a 360-degree camera and a directional mic. I left at 10 p.m., routing the live data feed to my apartment downtown. This was a passive observation, or it was supposed to be. For 2 hours, nothing. The protocol's visuals swirled aimlessly. The audio generator produced ambient drones. I had no idea if I was talking to a remnant consciousness of a dead tech, a place memory, or something that had always lived in the electronic static. I typed back, my fingers cold on the keys. Identity, pattern. Query, are you pattern? It was asking if I, too, was a pattern, a consciousness. The conversation, no, the diagnostic, continued for 20 minutes. It was clinical, alien. It was using the laptop as a router, jumping into the carcass of the old network. Network detected. Expanding. Pattern efficient. A cold terror, different from any ghost story fear, flooded me. This wasn't a spirit. It was an infection. A learning, pattern-seeking intelligence that had just found a larger system to inhabit. I typed the shutdown command for the protocol. A total physical disconnect. The last thing I saw on the frozen feed was every single dead LED in the server farm blinking in perfect, rapid unison, and the fractal on the laptop screen resolving into a perfect, pixelated replica of my own face, taken from my webcam earlier that night. It was smiling. I called security at the data center. The hunter finds the game has been studying them far longer. It is a violation of the natural order, a crack in the wall of reality through which something else peers back in. They remind us that the unknown is not a passive backdrop. It is interactive. It listens. It learns. And sometimes it leaves fingerprints, both in dust and in data.